2008 was a presidential election year in the U.S., and the Democratic National Convention was held here in Denver for the first time in 100 years. The protesters held their protests, of course, and the theme was Recreate 68. So what happened in 1968? Well, it was also a presidential year. And Iron Butterfly released In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. That was good if you like that sort of thing. There was the Tet Offensive in Vietnam, and student protests in such diverse places as Columbia University, Paris, and Warsaw. McDonald's introduced the Big Mac in 1968. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated that year, and so was Robert F. Kennedy. The Pennsylvania Railroad and the New York Central Railroad merged into Penn Central. Peaceful protests at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago somehow turned into riots. I'm glad that didn't get recreated here in Denver. The computer mouse and graphical interface had their first public demonstration that year. On Saturday, June 8th, as I was changing trains in Marion, Ohio, news came over the radio in the Depot coffee shop that James Earl Ray, suspected assassin of Martin Luther King, had just been captured in London. And that was the day I embarked on my first great railfan adventure. Sure wish I could recreate that. Actually, it began a few days earlier when I showed up at the ticket counter of Columbus Union Station, official guide in hand, and told the agent that I wanted to go to Baltimore by way of Chicago and Philadelphia, and then return to Columbus by way of Washington, D.C. and Detroit. Now the agent was okay with that until I told him that I would need a duplex roomette to Philadelphia on the Broadway Limited and a standard roomette on the Capitol Limited between Washington and Detroit. He really didn't want to go to the extra work involved in writing that up, but I insisted. So at 7:25 a.m. on Saturday, June 8th, I left Columbus on C&O train number 47, also known as the Sportsman, although I'm not sure why, as it wasn't listed that way in the official guide. Anyway, number 47, which consisted of a coach and a snack diner, broke off from the George Washington at Ashland, Kentucky, with Detroit as its destination. My destination was Marion, Ohio, where I would catch the Erie Lackawanna's Lake Cities for Chicago. My 8:22 a.m. arrival in Marion left me with 3.5 hours to kill. So I wandered around, took some pictures, and got back to the Depot coffee shop just in time to hear the midday news on the radio. The Lake Cities, with sleeping cars, coaches, and a diner, were scheduled out of Marion at 12:10 p.m. arriving at Chicago's Dearborn Station at 4:30 p.m. The next morning, I joined up with the Illini Railroad Club CTA 101, an all-day excursion over the Chicago Transit Authority's entire 101-mile system, including shop tracks and industrial and freight spurs. The special train consisted of several 1930s vintage Insel cars, maintained serviceable but rarely used by 1968. Examples of the Insel cars, as well as the newer cars seen in this video, can be seen and ridden today at the Illinois Railroad Museum. These kids were quite sure there was some mistake, as they had never before seen a passenger train on these tracks. I think some of them were afraid they would be blamed for it.
Inagata de vida, honey. Don't you know what I love you? Inagata de vida, baby. Don't you know what I always be true?